alternatives. I think that once full control is established over a major percentage of the population, and enough of the population is silenced and unwilling to stick their necks out, that we inevitably would be heading toward a Holocaust.
Dr. Robert Duncan put together the technology that allows the government to transmit thoughts and voices into the heads of Americans.
Dr. Robert Duncan. First question for you. What's negative about what you've done?
I've empowered the dark side by some of my work.
And what do you mean by that?
Technology is neutral.
Right.
It can be used for good or evil. I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, Department of Defense.
Is this the stuff, voices in the head and things like that?
Yes.
We've run into a few people that claim they got voices in their heads, they sleep inside tinfoil boxes, they do a lot of crazy things, it seems, but when they talk to us, they seem totally normal, they seem totally sane. Are these people crazy, or is the government doing this to them?
The government's doing this to them.
He's not even bothering to hide it.
They're called voice of God weapons.
So you know for a fact that these weapons that you worked on, they're being used domestically today?
Absolutely. You have to remember, the CIA has a long history of experimenting on our citizens, from LSD to...
Sure. Okay, we're talking here like going back to MK Ultra and all that in the 60s and 70s. But we were told all that stopped. Is that untrue?
Untrue. These programs continue under new names, new budgets. It's the ultimate weapon.
Are there citizens of this country that are being abused with this technology?
Worse than abused, that's a light word. They're being tortured.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all. Okay, doctor, to deliver this, how do they get into your head? I've heard of these Gwen towers. They allegedly were used before, and now they claim that they're not used for anything.
They do match up with the properties and necessary capabilities. They easily could be broadcasting across the country messages to people and causing them extreme pain. That's part of the whole world domination strategy. Control the population from subconsciously to consciously.
And now we've got a motive. Controlling dissenters, controlling the world, controlling you and me. Who are the controllers? I mean, is that our president? The Federal Reserve?
No.
So these are people within our government at a certain level making these decisions, and they're not necessarily our president or our elected officials.
That's exactly right.
Wow. That makes it even more difficult because they can't be removed.
They can't be removed, and they're difficult to find. They hide in the dark crevices of our government.
You worked for these people. You worked on this. You helped to develop it.
I was naive. I did not know how the technologies were going to be put together and the ultimate weapon created.
You're not still working for them.
No.
You're unequivocally looking me right in the eye right now, and you're telling me you have no more to do with this, and that you're out to expose it?
That's correct, sir.
With your background and what you know, can you give us a hint on what we ought to do?
No.
No. Is it too late?
I actually believe it's too late.
So what you're telling me, every one of us should be in fear of this because every one of us at some point will be targeted?
The technology's advanced that far.
One of the men behind the technology admits he created a monster. An experiment in control, gone out of control. And what's worse, there's no telling how far it will go, or if it can ever be stopped.
Later, I asked Van Bice what a weapon using this technology could do.
Induce basically what would be considered hallucinations in people, direct them to do things against their so-called better judgment.
How easy would it be to assemble a weapon from existing off-the-shelf parts?
In 3 weeks, I could put together a weapon that would take care of a whole town.
First of all, why are they doing it? Is it for basically a blanket statement controlling the population? Or, and what do they do with this information once they get it?
I don't think they do anything with the information once they get it other than to establish a harassment protocol which will follow that targeted individual for the rest of his or her life. Why are they doing it? I see a number of reasons. First, I don't know if you've done any research on the phenomenon of capturing a percentage of the population in order to install a dictatorship. There is always a percentage of the population, roughly 20% or so, who will buckle and throw whatever constitutions might exist into the toilet and eagerly join the effort at destroying the remainder of the population. Part of the problem, or part of the objectives that they are seeking, obviously, is testing the latest and greatest in electronic weaponry.
Oh, he's just an old man! Let it go! Let it go! Let it go!
And other forms of technologies. A part of it is to control and choreograph those who are involved in these harassment operations on the dispensing end. And it would appear that those being targeted are simply objects who I see as ultimately being disposable. In other words, I think that once full control is established over a major percentage of the population, and enough of the population is silenced and unwilling to stick their necks out, that we inevitably would be heading toward a Holocaust. Most of those targeted are not and never have been a threat. I think that what happened initially when these operations began, probably 30 years ago, people were singled out perhaps because of some affiliation, either direct or indirect, with the United States government, and invited attention. But they were not singled out as being threats. They were singled out as being lucrative targets of experimentation. I had occasion to observe many, many, many instances of individuals in the corporate environment being singled out and targeted simply because they were convenient targets of opportunity. Many, many, many thousands, no doubt, are involved, but I would say that the bulk of those are running to their doctors and taking totally unnecessary prescription drugs. Collecting the evidence, if you were to go to, frankly, I strongly recommend that you keep your faculties together and avoid going to see psychiatrists and psychologists, because the pattern that is evolving is that they are highly complicit in these operations. And if you go to a medical doctor, you do not talk about because medical doctors many are also involved. I've seen a tremendous expansion of these activities since the early 1990s, and it has moved forward in consistent fashion, become ever more sophisticated and ever more widespread. There was no sudden burst or flurry of activity since 9/11.
Now, is this protocol of surveillance and harassment seemingly patterned after a government protocol now applied to the general civilian population?
It's difficult to pinpoint everything at this stage on the U.S. government exclusively, because these are global operations.
Okay.
The pattern, the protocols are virtually identical on a global scale. So someone is overseeing the entire activity. The government obviously is complicit, because otherwise these operations would not be allowed allowed to exist. Why? It's hard to say. Whether it's for testing electronic weapon systems for future use under combat conditions, or whether ultimately there's a holocaust in the offing, it's hard to say. In order to target someone, it requires that that person be put under surveillance, so that their personality traits, their capacity to interrelate with people, their capacity for corruption or non-corruption, that seems to be a critical point, and even their religion factors into it. Following a period of harassment, they are singled out for preliminary stages of harassment, which would include gang stalking, entry of their private homes and apartments, followed by gradually intensified and ultimately extremely intensified electronic harassment. This is a pattern that is unfolded over and over and over. In order to target a person, you have to be able to see that person, and while they may not be able to, they may, on entering the house, have implanted miniature cameras, miniature microphones, as a means of further monitoring the person, but that is not necessarily the means by which they home in on a person. There are plenty of technologies that allow for the imaging of a person who might be sitting in a chair, as you mentioned you might be using infrared imagery techniques, for example, which conceivably could be used in a software program that would be connected to an electronic weapon system. I have seen evidence of a closed-circuit TV, and it seems to be some form of major source of entertainment and perhaps instruction for the individuals participating in this harassment. I deal with, I've developed a means for communicating with perps directly and for making them feel like the trailer trash that they are. So gang stalking is not one of their favorite activities in my case. The primary activity now is to see what I can survive in the way of an induced brain aneurysm or stroke or heart attack. In amplified form, there's sufficient, the frequencies have the capacity to kill. So that's one reason why the Department of Defense refers to them as less than lethal rather than non-lethal weapons. As a matter of fact, the Department of Defense has gone so far as to eliminate them, to remove them from the category of even less than lethal weapons and to bury them under the category of electronic weapons, trying to make them a little bit blacker. And what I have found is that the perpetrators appear to belong predominantly to one particular religion, whereas the targeted individuals do not belong predominantly to that particular religion. There is a religious influence, but that's not to say that these people aren't just being used as puppets by some broader interest.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
There's a need for a new world order.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
To build a new world order.
It is a new world order.
President Obama and
British Prime Minister Gordon today calling for a new world order.
And the president outlined his vision of a new world order.
A world order that I think all of us would like to see.
I think a new world order is emerging.
New world order.
New world order.
In the new world order.